doesn't even matter.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Glendora City Council and the Glendora Planning Commission. At this time, former Mayor Lois Shade will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, after which I ask that all of us observe a moment of silence and remembrance of the victims and friends. Pledge.
You place your hand over your heart and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the greatest country in the world.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome you here tonight for this meeting. Just a few housekeeping issues. If you would like to make a public comment later under public comment time, there are cards and pencils on the back table. There are also copies of the report that you can find back there as well. The restrooms are on the lower level, which can be reached both by stairs and by the elevator. And this is being taped this evening, and you will be able to see it on the city's website as well as Channel 3 in a few days. And with that, we would like to extend a big thank you to the Planning Commission for all of the work that you have done in cooperation with the public on working on the Route 66 specific plan. And with that, I turn it over to you, Mr. Matthews, to introduce your folks and tell us a little bit about your process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, and to you and Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Michael Matthews, and I'm currently the chairman of the Planning Commission representing you in this city. Allow me to introduce the current Planning Commission members that at least I have with me tonight. As you probably can tell, we're fairly cohesive. We can work short-handed and go along pretty well. But to my far left is Mr. Hamlow. Next to him sits your vice chair, Mr. Battaglia. The two missing members that should join us later are Mr. Jared and Mr. Dysart. Thank you for the opportunity that brings us together this evening as a community to work jointly in a process to design a future pathway and establish new guidelines in a collective effort to lead the city towards a healthy and vibrant future. I trust we all share the same ambition to develop a blueprint for our future, one that every resident will be able to embrace as their own. I want to acknowledge those residents here tonight and thank them for being part of this process. We could not be here were it not for the focused efforts of this city's planning director, Mr. Kugel, and his staff. They have patiently put countless hours into the background and documentation required for reviewing the Route 66 specific plan with the Planning Commission and concerned residents in a process to help define our city's future. And so it is with gratitude and thanks to each of our planning staff, we are now able to move forward better equipped and with a clearer vision. You may not know that beginning on April 21st of this year, I and my four fellow commissioners until tonight have been locked away in a dark room deep beneath the council's hallowed chamber with nothing more than a single dim bulb, ham and cheese sandwiches from Carrot Corner across the street, no mail, a keg of cold donut man coffee, tucked away with no public interruptions, deliberating which of us was going to go mental first. I'll spare you the details. So now, this community came face to face with unforeseen concerns as new developments became reality and began taking shape. There have since been many discussions in this community, both public and private, expressing points of view both for and against such developments. It even reached into our most recent elections. Hence, you took appropriate action in representing the city and instructing this planning commission to review and update the current Route 66 specific plan, in which certain existing parameters allowed for developments that resulted in projects larger than we may have desired. Welcome, Mr. Chair. Thank you. A little history and background. The current Route 66 specific plan was adopted and established in 2003. The genesis of this plan was initiated by the City Council late in the year 2000. That process from 2000 to 2003 was an elaborate and extensive one that included significant time and effort of staff. Both elected and appointed members, as well as numerous community residents, met when needed to envision and to determine what components or guidelines would best direct the future goals and needs for this city at that time. There were several reports generated by outside firms that provided insight and facts into various aspects relative to this process, including historical and future projections for both population, economics, transportation, and other factors that are typically accepted as influencing or affecting the future of a community such as Glendora. The process. The goal of the Route 66 specific plan was that Glendora was in need of a specific directive that could attract and encourage residential and commercial development to update a tired major corridor through Glendora, one that had not seen any significant development or improvements in years. Reports were commissioned, statistics generated by experts which identified various critical factors not only with Route 66, but with our entire city, which uncovered what was limiting our ability to attract development, and conditions that were cited are geography. Route 66 is obscured from the 210 freeway by the South Hills. Glendora is not centrally located, with having the national forest bordering us to the north, which not only limits our market radius, but our traffic radius. Future population projections. Population growth was projected to be slow looking forward from 2000 to 2010. Employment opportunities. Glendora had and continues to have a below average employment base that results in weak daytime retail activities. Demographic and design opportunities. Glendora had and continues to have, Glendora has no significant site or unique attraction to draw in visitors. We lack in defined or attractive gateways. And finally, land parcels on Route 66 are small with limited depths and parking limitations. The reports as submitted summarize that in the future 10-year period from 2000, every relative current demand that could encourage development would be low to moderate, especially given our existing circumstances. The specific plan basics were: the first step was taken to identify and then classify properties on Route 66. Those properties were then combined into individual sub-district development zones, of which there are 8, beginning from the east going west, and includes an overall streetscape design theme guideline. This could then direct specific needs-driven development improvements based on technical and expert input that recommended potential designs to meet this community's future goals for the Route 66 corridor and revitalize the city. Those reports made the following recommendations: that we maximize our neighborhood retail opportunities that include restaurants, apparel, home furnishings, specialty retail, etc. That we focus efforts at revitalization and beautification of the commercial area along Route 66 corridor. That we use redevelopment funds to assemble land, which of course we know is no longer with us. Expand the population base long-term with multifamily for sale and rental residential developments. Multifamily residential, as was identified, would work well in a mixed-use development at the proposed town center, or as it is now identified as the TCMU sub-district. Multifamily housing products are seen as expanding housing opportunities while creating an increased demand for retail development and ultimately putting a lesser demand on communities' infrastructure. As an interesting fact, as cited by Stanley R. Hoffman Associates in their report dated February 2003, they project that an increase of 1,000 households could result in nearly $26 million in additional commerce annually and create a demand for regional and community retail shopping space of over 66,000 square feet as a comparison. Next, they recommend focus on mixed-use development with office and residential components combined, provide for retail and housing needs of nearby college population, create defined gateways and activity nodes, and finally, an expansion of the existing office business park market area at the east end of Route 66. At this time, with your permission, Madam Mayor, I would like to turn the meeting over to our planning director and allow him the opportunity to, in greater detail, present to you the specific conditions currently existing for our Route 66 corridor, where those sub-districts which were individually reviewed by this planning commission resulted in our recommendations. It was our goal that the changes we are recommending be made will result in quality development opportunities for many years going forward. Mr. Kugel, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews, all the members of the Planning Commission who are here and members of the City Council. I'm very happy to bring to you the findings of a long review of the Route 66 specific plan, which began earlier this year, actually, as Chairman Matthews indicated in April this year. And thank the Commission for all the time they've spent looking and reviewing this, this important land use policy document for the city, as well as for the public who participated either by attending meetings, watching meetings on videos, any emails, comments that we received, and try to incorporate all the comments that I'm going to go over. Up on the screen and in front of you is really what the Commission's assignment was. And I think Chairman Matthews explained that and what we've been doing over the past year. So what I want to do is go through the recommendations of the Commission, present them to the Council on each sub-district, as well as some general recommendations, including some staff thoughts, and then let the Council discuss and react to that and provide some direction, either confirm we're heading in the right direction to move forward. As you know, in our strategic plan, I'm supposed to come back in January and present, a budget proposal for the type of work and consultants we may need to complete the specific plan. So that's what the next step would be. First, I want to cover some of the area-wide recommendations that were made as part of the Planning Commission's discussion on this. One of the things that is key to actually incentivizing or encouraging the development that Chairman Matthews was indicating in his comments are development incentives. And I think the Commission felt that while the development incentives were producing, housing development of various types in particular, that in some cases they were too easy to achieve, and they didn't necessarily result in better development. Also, it was sort of, sometimes they felt that there were gaps in what the incentives were meant to accomplish, in the sense that, there was a low bar, the bar was too low in some cases, where the development project got the development incentive increased in super high too easily. That's what the incentives are for. The other thing to keep in mind as we move forward are really, it's under the heading of greenhouse gas reduction mandates. That's really just an example of the state over time is becoming more involved in local land use planning issues. For historically in California, one thing that we have a lot of control over at the local council level and planning commission level are setting land use policy, probably more than anything else we do in terms of policy setting. And these issues that the state is becoming more involved with in terms of how they, the sort of policies and directions they provide us locally and laws that they implement are directly related really to population growth, issues of moving people around the region transportation-wise, and housing issues in terms of quantity and affordability and availability of housing to all different groups of people. I always like to, I'm sort of the numbers person when it comes to some of these things, and I always love to look at demographic trends. And the population of California in 1970, 40 years ago, was 20 million people. The last census in 2010, it was almost 40 million people. So in that 40-year period, population of the state doubled. And in the next 4 years, as Chairman indicated, it's going to slow. But by 2050, the Department of Finance of the state estimates in the next 40-year period that the population will be 50 million people. So we'll go from about 40 million to 50 million in that 40-year period, where in the last 40-year period, we doubled the population. So we're dealing with issues and planning for a region, which Glendora is part of, that is probably going to look at least as different now in 2050 as it looked at 1970 compared to now. And that's largely driven by the people that are in the region, moving to the region here already. Also, mixed use and lived work. I think one of the things that has been observed in this particular market, mixed use, I think is, and to some degree, is still talked about in a lot of planning circles of that as a solution to some of the housing population crises, as well as a way to address issues of blight and an oversupply of strip commercial and underperforming commercial properties, is that you revitalize it by introducing housing commercial on the same property. And the specific plan was structured in a way that it requires any time you do housing in certain subdistricts that it be associated on the same site with commercial. And so some of the recommendations you're going to see is to sort of break away from that requirement while not, prohibiting mixed use, at least giving more flexibility where housing and commercial can occur in closer proximity to each other while not being required on the same property or in the same building. So more of a horizontal mixed-use format, or or sort of I'm going to call it Southern California mixed-use, because we're still a very car-oriented area in this part of the San Diego Valley in Southern California, and for many years what's going to drive development moving around is this notion of really the car. It still is going to dominate. And also there were live work, part of live work is a format of housing where somebody lives in the same unit that they work in, and I think the commission would agree, that has never been brought to us. The only time that I'm aware it has been brought to the city, it was rejected as a part of a project about the early stages of the specific plan, so that would be recommended to be eliminated from the Route 66 specific plan. Also, the streetscape program that the chairman indicated, originally there were things that the redevelopment agency was going to fund. There's been changes in the types of plantings that are now recommended by the city, and so we're recommending that we look at the streetscape plan and update that to match current policies as well as the financial constraints of implementing the streetscape update. There's also a list of policies that really match the development standards, and I included them as I think one of the last two attachments in the report. I don't want to go through each of them because there's like 65 of them, but those would be updated as part of the update to the specific plan. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the 8 sub-districts, and I'll try to do this as efficiently as I can. I want to start at the east end of the specific plan and move west, and you'll notice that there are some areas where we don't propose a lot of changes, and other areas where the commission is recommending more comprehensive changes, and some that are worth discussions that we talk about this tonight. The first 2 districts at the very east end is the Technology Commercial Office sub-district of the specific plan, which on the east end is bounded by Amelia. So it's really almost the border of the city, and goes to the west to Lone Hill, or almost to Lone Hill. And this is the idea of, as again Chairman Matthews mentioned in the economic report, to introduce jobs in the community. This was the area where those that framed the specific plan were hoping that the Class A office space would develop, that this would be sort of the high-tech office in of the corridor. The next sub-district moving west is the Lone Hill Gateway, and this is really the primary, I think, sort of economic driver of this district is the state-of-the-art shopping center. While this is carved out as a gateway sub-district, really the development standards are not that different than what was there before the Route 66 specific plan. It's a retail-oriented, retail office-oriented type of commercial district. And these 2 districts do not allow or provide for any housing. They're strictly commercial districts. For the recommendations in these 2 areas are really to maintain and keep the existing development standards in terms of height, mass, setbacks, generally the uses, to maintain those. Even I think the commission recognized that there probably won't be a lot of changes over the next decade or 2 to take place. And I think as we look at the specific plan going forward, we should look at this as a 10 to 20-year plan. That's really the timeline. Probably the next time we'll want to update what's going on the Route 66 corridor. While it's in the current market, it has been difficult to attract office development at the very east end in that technology office. There doesn't seem to be a lot of demand for that relative to other types of development, particularly housing. In the last several years, that we would still be
wise to sort of stay the course in that land use scenario at the very east end. Just to give you an idea of what might occur, I think the specific plan was done in the sense that the city community wants to encourage and attract new economic developments and to try to really to create opportunities for developers and property owners to invest and redevelop older uses of properties, consolidate them into larger, more efficient uses. So the corner of Route 66 and Amelia, the very east end of the specific plan, and the city boundaries and the technology commercial office subdistrict has this corner piece, which is in red, that's property that the redevelopment agency purchased about 5 or 6 years ago, with the idea to sort of facilitate the consolidation of the other parcels on that corner for some type of office development that is encouraged by the specific plan. This is another view of that shopping center that you'll recognize as being occupied by frozen ropes. And a few other inline commercial uses as well as an auto use on the corner. This is probably, of those, in those two sub-districts, this is probably one of the two top sites that I could see, some type of investor wanting to help us in consolidating these lots and some type of development. One of the other ones, and this is sort of the, years ago I used to get calls every month or two about, what's going on with the corner of Grand and Route 66, it's the old flower shop, and now nobody calls about that because, developed that property. Now I get calls about the former Flag gas station, what's happening with that property? And, the owner has shut down the gas station, pulled the tanks, has some ideas as to what they would like to do with it and try to market it. Come in from time to time over the past 5 years, but hasn't been able to affect anything yet. But I think this is an opportunity for the likelihood of what could happen here. Another bank, another fast food restaurant of some type on that corner, a small strip commercial. I think is probably for number 3. I think the first two are probably more likely than any other type. But it's a small site. It's similar to type site. Some topography issues, but again, this is a retail commercial area and opportunity for something to happen there. So really, the first two sub-districts is pretty much status quo in terms of what the commission is recommending. The next sub-district, the Route 66 Service Commercial, this sub-district is characterized as one that is intended to accommodate office, retail, and light industrial type uses. And this is when we talk about the issue of small, narrow, or very deep but narrow parcels with limitations on how they might be reused or redeveloped by themselves. This is really the poster child sub-district in this specific plan. Again, this is an exclusively commercial sub-district. There is no residential uses allowed. So to the extent that there are residential, I think there may be a few homes or some rentals in this area that are not conforming to the current zoning. So the recommendations are to look at the minimum lot width is 300 feet. I think that is a very large frontage, and I think the idea was to leverage existing property owners with the redevelopment agency when it existed to try to consolidate parcels to do some type of light industrial type of a park maybe in this area. Which does seem pretty big, so we might want to look at how big of a property you need to be to conform the parcel. To research and consider different incentives to encourage lot consolidation and developments. I think this goes along with some of the earlier things I mentioned about generally looking at the development incentives and how they're applied and what bar we set for people to reach them. And to review, and this, I don't think the commission was unanimous on this, but there were some commissioners who felt that we should review some of these areas and possibly to incentivize developers to have opportunities for development, rezone some of the RSC to allow residential. And I'll sort of point out where some of the ideas where if you look if you look behind you, real quick, I'm sorry. This area right here that I'm circling with my little red dot, that is a residentially zoned area, the specific time that I'll talk about next. And I think some of the commissioners were saying, well, maybe we should look at the northern part of this area to be rezoned for residential, or maybe this extension of that. So those will be some of the things I think they're asking to look at. Some of the challenges to the RSC subdistrict are the deep but narrow lots. And here's an example of about 4 or 5 lots that are right next to each other in the middle of the RSC subdistrict that are used for a variety of older commercial uses. There's a lot of storage to some degree going on in the back of some of the buildings, but you can see with limited frontage for commercial space, for retail, it's very difficult to achieve that if you want to strip commercial center, or even to do sort of a light industrial condo type of development. It's very difficult to do that given the width of some of these properties, although they're very deep. So over time, really what's happened is these have been carved out for various reasons and uses over many, many years. And now, again, the specific plan was trying to figure out a way to incentivize lot consolidation, and I think that is still a goal within the specific plan. Likewise, this is the corner of Elwood and Route 66 on the northwest corner. Again, you have some, there's one lot, it's an L-shaped lot, goes up Elwood and goes all the way behind, these. And you can see how a lot of the ways parcels were carved up before these were in the city, or at a time when the zoning standards were much different, were a matter of convenience for small business people just saying, hey, I need this little sliver of property because I'm going to operate, whatever they were going to do, and that's sort of how things evolved. The Central Route 66 residential, I showed you the location of that. This is where we start transitioning from the commercial end of the corridor to the residential end of the corridor. This subdistrict currently allows residential to occur on its own. It's the only subdistrict with residential that allows it to occur without mixed use component on the same site. A notable project, I think, is the Elwood Apartments, which behind the 31 Flavors at the southwest corner of Route 66, and Elwood, so that gives you an idea of the type of housing that this subdistrict encourages. The commission, again, eliminate the incentives for mixed use, but maintain the base height and density development standards up to 45 feet is what the zone currently allows. 25 units to the acre, up to 35 units to the acre, with incentives to give you. The Elwood Apartments is a 30 unit to the acre project, so that's the type of product that you might see at that level. I will say that probably the housing market is, and I think we need to probably, this is where the economic consultant comes into play. The current market, as I see it, folks typically come to us wanting to build attached or detached condos and townhomes. Don't see anybody at this point in the market coming to build anything that involves structured parking or subterranean parking or podium parking, where the construction costs are much higher. Some of the opportunity sites that might, again, as we talked about these all, you can see where the parcels, some of them are deep, some of them are oddly shaped, with a variety of different uses on here. Some of them are commercial. This is about mid-block, and you can see a combination of, there's a mobile home park, there's auto uses, and there's even public storage to the west. That's actually pretty new, but again, I think the specific plan is going to encourage consolidation and redevelopment of parcels like this. Likewise, right next to the Elwood Apartments, you have a motel on the west, not developed in the rear of the property, an older home park. So again, this is the type of thing that with the incentives for lot consolidation are meant to encourage, and the type of housing that they're hoping to attract housing investment. Now, as we move further west, this is the sub-district where I think we spent the most time in terms of discussing, and this is the sub-district where the most radical changes I think are recommended by the commission, and this is the town center mixed use. It's the largest sub-district in the area. In the south, it goes all the way down. It starts in Colorado, in the south, all the way up to City Hall. The building we're in is in town center mixed use sub-district. It goes all the way west, almost to Grand, and to east to about Pasadena, and it includes a lot of area, and it is all about mixed use and the future and the gold line station. So when the framers created this, they were saying, we are going to completely incentivize this area to transform into a mixed use with, and the word street-oriented development is peppered throughout the specific plan. This is one of the two specific plan areas where there is a maximum setback, where you can place your building no further back than 10 feet on Route 66 or 15 feet, but so that it's really oriented around vertical mixed-use development. So what you can see in Pasadena, we have the ground floor commercial with residential above it. This is what the subdistrict is all about. The recommendations are to divide the subdistrict up into 5 different areas, and I will quickly go through them. This is a sort of a proposed map, revised map of the subdistrict. To the north, it's in the dark brown up to Foothill, going down Glendora. This area here is proposed to be jettisoned from the Route 66 specific plan and joined with the village zoning, which is the civic center area plan. It allows mixed use. This is probably in terms of, especially as you get up here in this area, probably one of the best candidates in the city where mixed use actually would probably work as it was envisioned in the specific plan, in my opinion. Going to some of the areas off of Vermont, as well as the triangle piece here, this would be taken out and rezoned or redesignated as part of the specific plan as a medium density type of zoning, medium density housing, so it would be more complementary and commensurate with the zoning that's around it. Most of the areas around here are R3 multiple family, and likewise these areas are R2 or R3 multiple family. The purple here is maintaining the existing zoning. The core here around Vermont and around the station really take this and keep it as a sort of coal mine station, transit-oriented zoning. I think this is where some fine-grained type of planning needs to take place, because I think probably people think it's probably a good idea to try to support and keep the Albertson Shopping Center. There probably are some opportunities over time on Vermont that will come up for redevelopment. But everything is this is sort of the spoke of the wheel type of a situation where you have the Albertson Shopping Center at the center, probably should be maintained as commercial, have a significant commercial presence in the future goal line through here. Lastly, there's a lot of discussion about, there's a hospital here and another medical building. There's some interest in the hospital expanding. The medical building that owns this parcel has come and proposed different things. And we're discussing more with them about creating maybe a medical type campus here, since we have the Presbyterian Hospital just a couple blocks over, and maintaining this as a medical campus. There might be some opportunities in the future for more types of medical offices and services that are needed in the community. This little purple space here is part of it. It's a hospital parking lot, and it's part of the town center mixed use. And we're proposing that just go revert back to medical services versus we think it's probably more valuable to the hospital for use there than trying to change it over to housing and mixed use type development. So again, I've said this before, the recommendation would be to eliminate the mixed use incentives and requirement and allow residential and commercial to independently occur on separate parcels, or what's called my Southern California mixed use type development, and preserve an area for commercial, key being the Albertson Shopping Center. Reduce the maximum height and density in the sub-district with incentives. You can develop up to a 75-foot tall building at the most, with a residential density of 55 units to the acre. And I think the commission felt that should be reduced somewhat and go down to 3/4 or 45 feet tall. There was some discussion, and I think this is something we have to work through in what I was on the previous page, that sort of more transit-oriented area, the orange area in the center, allowing a little bit taller buildings. If that was deemed the right thing to do, but I think that needs to be, vetted out through sort of this next step that we take. Again, I think with the maximum setbacks, it's somewhat limiting with the types of development you can get, and really what the district is oriented to, this sort of idea of vertical mixed use does not work everywhere, and there doesn't seem to be a strong market for that type of development at this point in time, or maybe even in the foreseeable future. But so rather than have maximum setbacks, I don't think we want to give up on the idea of street-oriented development, which is a horrible term, but the idea is that you have more people on the street, more pedestrian activities, by introducing housing and other things that people walk around to do. But I think we do need to give ourselves more flexibility in the commission about the same thing. The Barranca Gateway, this is sort of the town center mixed-use light, it's another mixed-use sub-district, and it's the other district that has the maximum setback requirement for the street-oriented type development. The recommendations are very similar to the town center mixed-use in terms of the, type of flexibility with setbacks, not requiring mixed-use commercial with every residential project, and the type of recommendations for height, mass, and density of residential development that might occur in this area. The last two sub-districts are also mixed-use sub-districts. The Grand Avenue sub-district has very similar development standards currently to the Barranca Gateway, except it does not have a maximum setback other than that part that fronts on Route 66, and as you can see, most of the sub-district fronts on Grand Avenue. The recommendations here would be to eliminate the residential component or uses permitted in this sub-district, as most of it is commercial. And with the exception of the shopping center at Baseline in Grand, the old Mayflower Shopping Center, I don't think anybody anticipates a lot of changes to take place. I only mention that because that center, it's been a long time since there have been any significant upgrades or investment in that center. And it's right near the freeway, so at some point in time, if there becomes a tipping point for the investors, property owners, I can see possibility of some investment there. We're already seeing, as you probably know, the Rouse is closing on the corner. We have an application right now to remodel that center, as well as include 2 new building pads on that property. So I think you're seeing it's sort of first as the residential comes, and we've seen more residential, and now I think as that the economic study predicted, now we're seeing that additional residential, we're seeing some investment in commercial, here and some other places in the city. So hopefully that will continue. But again, the main recommendation in this sub-district and the corner of Grand and Route 66 was to have the residential component eliminated and be exclusively a commercial, sort of retail-oriented and office-oriented sub-district. The update process, that really concludes my going through the recommendations from the commission. As you know, these plans is, we'll be coming back over the next month and we're estimating and figuring out what types of consultants and help are needed to update the specific plan, because it will, even though I think some of these things are very focused, I anticipate the update to be comprehensive. There are a lot of issues with the specific plan on the administrative side, internal consistency, how we interpret and apply things, in addition to some of the bigger policy issues such as, missing good term to use, but adjusting heights, densities, as well as different uses within each of the sub-districts, updating, impacts to new developments and fees that may be charged for that, et cetera. So with that concludes my conveyance of the commission's satisfying regarding the specific plan. So please, I'm happy to answer any questions, and see the answer to any comments. Please feel free to discuss and take public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Kugel. As should be expected, the needs and desires for the future of Glendora are varied. There are, we can all agree, an infinite quantity of ideas existing in the city as to each one's desires for our future development. I would note that success is often achieved through diversification. The use of many variations of development will offer more to all. But the process of looking forward is not without peril or risk. It is my personal concern that we as a representing body do not fall victim to a knee-jerk response to those things that shout over what is the right thing to do. This concludes the presentation, one that I trust has provided you and our residents a clear insight into those items that, based on this commission's reviews, we find merit for your consideration. I, along with my fellow commissioners, thank you for this opportunity and are prepared to act as this council compels us to proceed. I now return the meeting to you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Matthews. Again, thank you very much to the Planning Commission for all of your work on this, and thank you, Mr. Kugel, for your presentation, and you and your staff and all of the hours you put into this. Now, before I bring it back to the council and the commission for questions and comments, I'm going to go to public comment. Just a reminder, if you do wish to speak, there are public comment cards on the back table. Please fill them out, and you can bring them up and turn them in at the table over here. And then we will call you forward. First card, low shade.
Just a few quick comments. Some of them are redundant. I do like the idea of paying attention to Glendora Hospital. Years ago, they talked about expanding, creating additional offices, and there is a wider effect as the aging population grows. The services from a hospital, medical offices, medical services grows, and can be a valuable asset to the city as sales tax revenue can. Still concerned as you build this density, particularly in the town center area, that you're going to have traffic problems. At some point in time, it's probably a good place for the density next to the train station, but you're going to have to address the traffic issues. As you go forward and try to create sales tax revenue with additional commercial, I'm kind of curious how the internet is going to affect the city and its sales tax base in the long term. I've become more of an internet shopper, and I'm sure the younger population does it on a much more regular basis, and that's got to impact us. I think a couple of the things that have concerned the community that I've heard is when you get into the height and the density issues, how does that impact the view vistas? They like looking at the mountains, and they'd like not to have 45, 50 feet blocking their view. They think it impacts their housing value. So whatever you do, that needs to be a consideration. And mixed use is probably up for a long, hard discussion. It's not flying too well in small communities like us.
Thank you. Next speaker, Efren Jolson.
Mayor Davis, members of the council, members of the commission, good evening. My name is Efren Jolson. I'm the Director of Forward Planning for Watt Communities. First, I want to thank staff for consistency of communication through this whole process. They've been great. I'm sure you're all aware of our proposal on the table and constant communication with Jeff and his staff. They've been wonderful. As you may know, we have an application pending under the current TCMU zone that does not come close to what the zone allows for with regards to density. Actually, the proposed plan falls more in line with what the R3 zone would require. Knowing this, we are happy we waited to see the results of the recommendations for the Route 66 specific plan review. Excuse me. The recommendations on the table agree that R3 zone uses seem more appropriate north of the railroad. In light of this recommendation, we have designed a plan similar to what we previously proposed that meets the intent and standards of the R3 zone. As the specific plan review process continues, we request from you the opportunity for staff to review our R3 plan and proceed with our application process prior to the Route 66 specific plan revision process being completed. consideration.
Thank you. Tina Gonzalez.
Hi, my name is Tina Gonzalez, and I've attended many planning commission meetings and city council meetings over the past 2 years. Something I've heard many times is that if something is not specified in writing, whether it be in a policy, rule, mandate, whatever, specific plan, then the assumption can be made that whatever outcome the city governing body wants it to be. And I've also heard it said, well, since there wasn't any comments in email form or public hearing regarding such and such a matter, then it can be assumed that there was no opposition and the city residents are okay with it, or that it can be left up to interpretation. So there's just a few things that I saw in this recommendation that may be a moot point, maybe I'm just lying or whatever, but I wanted to point them out and get it on record. The chart of the current development incentives show, as shown in Exhibit K, on pages 33 to 35, point out what the current regulations are, and then on page 9 to 27 are the recommendations. With regard to the technology, commerce and office, and Amelia Gateway, the findings stated standards appear to be appropriate, so clear to what they want, leave it status quo. With regard to the Route 66 service commercial, there is no recommendation to review, change, or maintain the height, which is currently 35 feet or 2 stories. And in my opinion, by not stating this clearly, it can be implied that a greater height as incentive could be acceptable. And that's the same thing that I interpreted also with regards to the Route 66 residential. Regarding the town center mixed use, again, it was specific, says limit the height to 45 feet to 50 feet maximum. So again, it is very specific. Regarding the Barranca Gateway, the recommendation states a maximum height should not exceed 3 stories or 45 feet. In other words, no change is recommended. And then regarding the grand mixed-use development, development standards allow for 45 feet or 3-story buildings up to 4 stories. And there is no recommendation regarding the height. Thus, in my opinion, by not stating the recommendation to maximize height standards, it can be implied a greater height is acceptable as an incentive. So my point in bringing this up is that we, the residents, may not be well versed in all of the planning commission lingo, and you might be saying that there is no need for recommendations as it is already set in the development standards. But I want these points to be clear when you are directing staff to revise and update the Route 66 specific plan, and at each of the sub-districts regarding height restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Smith.
Good evening, Mark Smith here. So we established the plan in 2003. And then that's basically what you've got right here. You're following it like the communists do for their 5 and 10 and 15-year plans. We all know what happened to those. 2010, RDA dissolved, redevelopment. You see, your plan in 2003 was balanced on the back of the development agency being solvent and solid. So from that point on, when it was said and dissolved, you should have gone out and had a re-evaluation of everything. Here we are in 2015. Please keep that in mind. Where are the economic studies to go forth with your, shallow plans? The economy has changed. The workforce style has changed. You have moved or removed manufacturing out of Glendora as a whole. It has gone down to small 10,000, 20,000 square foot units. And even those, once they do the prototyping, they send it overseas. And then people, of course, use their iPads or pods, whatever you want to call them, and they buy it and have it shipped to their front door. There's no need for brick and mortar buildings. So that is a case. You have this concept in mind that we're going to do away with cars. Everybody's going to be hot lapping it around on their little flat feet and bicycles. Fooled you. Tesla fooled everybody. Electric cars are here to stay. This is California is a car culture because we have good weather, no rain. I hope we change that a little bit. Now, point being we're getting back into is Monrovia started their redevelopment agency in 1974, 74 to 2003. Where's the disconnect? And even at that point, you didn't want to do it right because of several problems that were discovered later on and then quickly covered up. Now, it's a living document, this item, and we've seen it changed on a whim, and I won't get into that, but it's done by 3 people, the city manager, planning director, and city attorney. If I can bring in a project that we can gross a huge amount of money on fees and so forth, then we're going to modify that plan. Well, that's great. It's done for one specific problem. This is the last comment. The city has hired and is paying $321,097 for an overall specific plan dealing with Arrow Highway. In my determination, you need to do that to this whole concept here you brought forth and drug out. It's killing people to have to listen to this over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Boyd?
Mayor Davis, Council, Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to thank you as veterans for the Veterans Day ceremonies that you put on in the city for the memorial that you erected a few years ago. Mayor Davis, I know every veterans event, memorial event, patriotic event for the last decade that I've been at, you've been too, and I know there's many more that you've been there and I haven't been. So thank you very much. When I got out of the military 40 years ago, after 3 years overseas, people didn't say thank you for your service. A lot of people said thank you, weren't very nice, so it's very good to be acknowledged. With regard to the plan review, we're here for tonight. It's a lot of work, I know, on behalf of the commission and the council. Thank you for that. I think we're making progress. I think our goal, I hope, at least we feel that way, is that we should have a height limit of 3 stories and a density limit, which is set now, of 30 units per acre. There should be no ups and downs from that. There should be no height bonuses. There should be no density bonuses, and there certainly should be no on-site parking reduction bonuses. I think that clarity is what we need here, and the devil is in the details. The plan review is not solid. I know that's not now we're doing the actual language, but I think everyone needs to watch that language very carefully so that we don't have opportunities for lawyers to come in and throw things in there that could be ambiguous, because that only advantages big developers who have teams of lawyers, and that's what they do for a living, is go out and try and take cities' codes and maximize their gains. Monstrosity galvanized everybody's attention. I know nobody focused on that. Nobody on the council was around in 2002 for that. SOS Glendora didn't focus on it. Even the gadflies who go around here looking for problems to complain about, they didn't focus on it. The building of that thing is what focused everybody's attention on it, and it's going to be focused for years to come, because all you got to do is drive down Route 66 and you have that visual assault on you. And I know most of you here have said, I'm not going to do that again. And you're going to own this vote. You're going to own this plan. And please, please limit it to 3 stories. Please don't have height and density bonuses, and please don't have on-site parking reductions. If they want to build it, they should have adequate parking for, at least adequate parking, or a little bit extra for everybody there, and they should not be allowed to weasel out on it under any circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Barbara Houston?
Thank you. Be so hard on yourself, Mark.
I don't need the 3 minutes. I just have a simple question. I've seen a lot of very angry people on Facebook, all people from my graduating class. from Glendora High School, and we're all discussing what's going to happen to Noakes Mortuary. We've been hearing that it's going to be torn down and made into another monster apartment complex. So can somebody please answer that?
When we finish with public comment and we come back for questions and comments, perhaps Mr. Krugel can address that specific area for you. But at this time, we will. Thank you. Mr. Alawas?
City Council and Planning, Michael Alowitz. I have two questions that came up prior to leading up to this revisit. One was the 45-foot height limit. Is that including facades and decoration on top? Is there another maybe 10, 15 feet on top of that? And secondly is what constitutes a story? How many feet is a story? The answer last time was it has to have a roof and a floor. That's a story. How many feet is a story?
Thank you. Mr. Wood? I know, sir, not seeing one.
Whenever you get a paper out like this, please put numbers on the page. It's on the page number. Because I refer to the page, such and such. And he starts off and says, our biggest environmental issues facing California, he lacks and absent is water. Of course, water is a huge issue, no matter if it's a small project, medium, or large. Also, we'd like to have a hydrologist on any plan, any building, any kind of commercial, residential, or apartment complex to sign off on it. And then he talks about affordable housing. Does that mean bringing in more Section 8 housing? Kind of skips over that. And then he says, successful examples of Portland, Pasadena, San Francisco. Well, don't forget Fullerton. It's a huge area. Even Avalon has some nice places down there off Jamboree. I drive by them all the time in Orange County. He doesn't talk anything about requiring underground parking. I do a lot of underground parking buildings myself, and complexes. Just about this too. I don't have a lot of time to go through it. When anybody ever types up, just put paste, the pages on their numbers. One lady talked about she does most of her shopping on internet. Well, internet's free of taxes. Now, the city of Glendora wants to promote local businesses. Give out a voucher for $5 to $10 or something to go to these local businesses because, internet, no taxes. That's a good number of reasons people go to Amazon so much. And various other sites. The height of the building, the financing is difficult. So, and how are you going to make these buildings pay for themselves? That's the hardest part, the very hard part. Whether Avalon's going to pay for itself in the near future, I don't know. You won't pay like the ones on Jamboree, the ones out on Wilshire. That's the hardest part. And then developers, have stockholders they have to listen to, and the stockholders pull the plug. Anyway, and also you're going to have to deal somewhat with the homeless, some sort of complexes. You give them some sort of a developer an idea about homeless.
Mr. Woolley, your 2 minutes, right? Thank you. Brett Bernard?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'd like to also express my thanks for the efforts and time that the Planning Commission spent in the process today, and in most particularly Jeff and and staff have been gracious in their time with the interests of the city and also us property owners here in town. I actually represent on capital management. We own the property literally right across the street, corner of Glendora and Foothill, northwest corner. We are looking forward to being engaged in the process as you move ahead. I think it's a good process that you've begun. Long process to go, but I think it's an exciting one for you and for the city of Glendora, as does my company. The Planning Commission Chair did express that there's not been much development. I think part of that is a function not just of the location of Glendora and what is presented here, but also obviously the national economy. But I think it's also been a function of our company, for example, we looked at to redevelop that property and had put that off in discussion with Jeff several years ago before I took over the project, understanding that you'd be undergoing this process. So it's also a function of delays by our property owners as well as perhaps others looking to see what was going to happen here. So I think I'm encouraged that you are moving ahead with this and that there is a possibility for revitalization for the downtown. My background is, as the commission knows and as Jeff knows, worked 18 years, my first 18 years on the white hat side of the table as a planning and building director myself with 3 different cities. So I understand the process you're going through, the impetus to somewhat downzone the properties given what has occurred. We just would encourage you to understand that there are economics involved with this too. People have invested in these properties looking for mixed use. I think mixed use, a lady before had said, not sure if mixed use is a viability. I think our property is actually very viable for mixed use. Perhaps not to the 50-foot, 45-foot level. I think we were encouraged to learn that perhaps the 3-story possibility would work for what we have envisioned for that property. So we believe that mixed use is a possibility in the future. We look forward to working with you all and being engaged as a property owner with a large portion of the downtown here in the future as you move ahead in this process. Thank you. We'll hopefully work with you again.
Thank you. Matthew Watson.
Good evening, my name is Matthew Watson. I represent the property owners at 243 South Vermont and 296, 300, and 308 Carroll, which are currently zoned from the TCMU zone. I think you're all aware at this point, there's a pending application by Watt Communities on that property. I want to thank staff and the commission for all the comments thus far. I think it's come a long way. We're hoping to bring it along a little farther. I just wanted to say that we support the downzoning of the property from 55 units to the medium density residential. We feel that's a good fit for the area. It seems about right. It just seems like that's what should be there. And we had the opportunity years ago to develop what you see at the corner of Route 66 and we didn't want to do that. Lots of people came and asked us, and just because been a long time, didn't want to do it, and we support the lots application and support them for the property that you can give some consideration to the application prior to the completion of the process. We respect the process it's going through, but we're hoping that since what was proposed before was essentially consistent with the zoning but for the mixed use requirement and what's being proposed still is consistent with what's being proposed in the proposed zoning, that we might be able to get some consideration of the project. So, thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the speaker cards I have. Anyone else wishing to speak during public comment? I invite you to come forward at this time. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the Planning Commission and the Council for questions and comments.